it a few months ago, on the second Sunday of Lent. The story of the Transfiguration is always the gospel in all three cycles, the A, the B, the C cycle. And this year we heard Matthew's version, which we've just heard again today. And we're hearing it again today because August 6th is the Feast of the Transfiguration. So when it falls on a Sunday, it takes the place of the Sunday of the ordinary time of the church year because it's such an important feast. And the question that I think this feast proposes to us is this: have you seen anything new today? How many of you have seen something new today? Raise your hands. Something absolutely you never saw before. Okay, a couple. Leonard, stand up and show the baby, okay? All right. Now I ask you, how many of you have seen something new today? Raise your hands. Right, because God's newness is all around us all the time. But you know, we become so closed off to it. Things become so familiar to us. You've heard the phrase, I'm sure, familiarity breeds contempt. We become so familiar with things that we don't even like them anymore. But perhaps familiarity also brings boredom. Familiarity brings blindness. We don't see the new things that are in front of us. That baby just processed all around the church. The great writer, British apologist G.K. Chesterton said this. He said, "The greatest of all illusions is the illusion of familiarity." The greatest of all illusions is the illusion of familiarity. In other words, we think we know what's there. We think we know what's in front of us because we've seen it before, because we've maybe grown up with it, or we've spent so much time with it. We're familiar with it. Well, today we have that in the gospel, in this magnificent story of the Transfiguration. Peter, James, and John are invited by Jesus to go up this mountain, and they know Jesus. They know he's a carpenter. They know he's pretty special. But they also know where he came from. He came from Nazareth. His father was Joseph. His mother was Mary. They know his relatives. He was a carpenter like his dad, He had sawdust on him. He sweated like a carpenter. He smelled like a carpenter. He was dirty like a carpenter. And then all of a sudden he took up this other calling, and he was a rabbi. And he did wonderful things. They heard him preach in marvelous ways. They saw him work some miracles. They saw him heal some people. So they knew there was something going on here. And now they go up to this mountain with this man who is so familiar to them. And all of a sudden, who he really is revealed to them for the first time, because there's Moses and there's Elijah. The law and the prophets, the complete and total hope of Israel is realized in this man Jesus, and they see him as the glory of God, and they're blinded by this glory. Sisters and brothers, the glory of God is all around us. But like Peter, James, and John, so often we think we know things so well that we don't even see them. We're blind to them. G.K. Chesterton also wrote this. He said, "Learn to look at things that are familiar until they look unfamiliar to you." Learn to look at things that are familiar until they look unfamiliar to you. In other words, until you break through your impression, your bias, your first judgment, your familiarity. Set that aside. And maybe we shouldn't say just things, but maybe more importantly, people. People we know so well. We put people into those labels, into those categories, because maybe we've lived with them so long, or we've worked with them so long, or we've had to put up with them for so long. Did you ever see a piece of amber with a bug frozen inside of it? Maybe for millennia it was in there. It was trapped in there when it was liquid, and then it hardened, and it's still there. Well, sometimes I think that's our impressions of people. We put them in amber and we harden them, and we don't let them change, or maybe we don't change in our understanding of them. So we have to look at people, we have to look at situations that are familiar to us so deeply that they become unfamiliar to us. Imagine how we would treat people. Imagine how we would treat people if we did that. Imagine how we would see people if we did that. I think I quoted this a couple of weeks ago, this wonderful line from Betty Smith in her book, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Betty Smith wrote this. She said, "Look at everything as if you are seeing it for the first, or either the first or the last time. Look at everything," and I'll put in parentheses, "and everyone," and maybe underline that, "as if you're seeing it or them either for the first or the last time." And then she says, "Thus is your time on earth filled with glory." Imagine if you saw your kids that are driving you crazy like you were seeing them for the first time when you brought them home from the hospital. Imagine if you saw your spouse who's driving you nuts because of what he or she always does, no matter how many times you've asked them to change. Imagine if you saw them like you saw them on your wedding day or the day you met. The mystery, the wonder, the joy that would be there. Imagine if you saw your aged parents so weak and frail perhaps that they can't get out of bed, as if you saw them when you ran home from school after the first day of school and they embraced you and helped you to grow. Imagine if we could see everything and everyone like we're seeing them for the first or the last time. That's what happens in the gospel today. They see Jesus like they've never seen him before, and the fullness of the glory of God is revealed, and the glory of God shines forth in all of us. The wonderful English poet William Wordsworth, in his Intimation of Immortality, wrote this about a baby. He said, "Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar, not in entire forgetfulness and utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory. Do we come from God, who is our home?" Trailing clouds of glory. Each one of us comes from God, and we can't not see those clouds of glory surrounding our sisters and brothers. Remember Pigpen in Peanuts, huh? How there's always like a cloud, but it's always dirt around him. Well, that's not how we live. We live with not a cloud of dust, but a cloud of glory around us. But oftentimes people don't see that. We don't see that in them, and they don't see that in us. So today and every day, let's try to see something new, something that may have been there all our life, but we've never seen before, or we've never seen in this way. And thus our time on earth will be filled with glory. Please stand.